Now, when it comes to Claressa Shields, this is exactly the moment where the entire narrative flips in a way nobody in boxing expected to see coming. Because what's unfolding right now is not a comeback story, it's not a victory parade, and it's nowhere close to the next chapter of an Olympic great. What we're looking at is far more chaotic, far louder, and a lot harder to justify. Because the same fighter who once ruled the heavyweight landscape with Olympic gold shining around her neck is now showing up in a wig that looks straight out of a budget Halloween bin, like something pulled from a Zeus Network set, acting like this is some kind of glow-up the internet is supposed to applaud. And before we even go deeper, you already know the routine. Boxing is bleeding out right now. The ring feels vacant. The legacy is hanging by a thread. So drop a like, hit subscribe, and run the engagement up, because this one is getting out of hand fast. It's funny in moments where it really shouldn't be, and it's only going to get uglier before anyone even thinks about fixing it. Here's the part nobody on the Claressa side wants the spotlight on. The streets are talking, clips are spreading, screenshots are everywhere. And across hip-hop pages, boxing forums, and group chats from Detroit to Atlanta, the verdict forming is brutally simple, because everyone keeps repeating the same thing, that Claressa Shields has gone from undisputed multi-division champion to a full-blown reality TV cautionary headline in what feels like a single news cycle. And the wild part is, she doesn't seem to recognize it. She's acting like this is a flex. She's treating it like a rebrand. She genuinely believes being filmed wilding out in a baddie's house carries the same weight as dropping opponents into the second row. And that's exactly what has fans, sparring partners, and even former trainers deeply concerned. Because once a fighter starts confusing chaos for momentum, the comeback arc gets almost impossible to write. So let's lay it out properly. If you don't know who Claressa Shields is, you should, because her resume isn't up for debate. 2 Olympic gold medals, undisputed across multiple divisions, and world titles stacked so high they practically need security clearance. There was a time not too long ago when the conversation about the greatest female boxer alive started and ended with her name, and anyone disagreeing got shut down immediately. The streets respected her, the casual fans respected her, and the purists did too. The ones who never hand out praise lightly still gave her her flowers. So how does someone with that level of respect in the bank end up spending her spotlight on the Zeus Network of all places? That's the question nobody around her seems willing to answer honestly. And that's exactly why this story keeps growing legs. Because here's what actually went down. Claressa Shields, instead of chasing the next massive pay-per-view payday or locking in a legacy-defining fight, made the decision to step into a guest role with the Baddies cast. Not a documentary, not a controlled interview, but a full-blown reality TV chaos run built entirely on controversy and attention. And the clips that came out of it are not the kind you want tied to your name when you're trying to be remembered alongside the female Muhammad Ali. They're the type of moments that get screen recorded, slowed down, and replayed endlessly by podcasters, bloggers, and commentators waiting for any opening to tear the Claressa Shields brand apart. And right now, they've got all the material they need. Then, on top of everything, came the hair situation. Because if you've been online, and the internet did not hold back at all. People are saying she's copying Remy Ma. People are saying it's intentional, like she's trying to provoke Remy Ma, baiting a response, daring her to react. Others are calling it Chucky energy. Others say it's giving Blade vibes. Some even claim she's got a secret Pinterest board labeled "I borrowed it," at least according to the internet chatter. And under normal circumstances, hair color wouldn't even be a conversation. People change looks every day. People move on instantly. That's just life. But here, the issue isn't just the orange tone. The issue is timing, context, and the long receipt trail attached to it. Because Remy Ma had the orange aesthetic first. Remy Ma built that look first. Remy Ma has been associated with that style for years, and Remy Ma is tied directly to the man at the center of Claressa Shields' current public situation. And once you cross that line, once you step out of that salon looking like some kind of tribute version of Remy Ma, the same woman whose husband you're now publicly tied to. You're not just picking a hairstyle anymore. You're basically mailing the internet a message and acting surprised when everybody reads it out loud. Now, you could try to dismiss it as pure coincidence. All right, let's entertain that for a second. But the problem is the coincidences don't stop there, because this was never just about hair. It was the entire presentation. It was the poses in the photos. It was the outfits and the fits. People started putting the images side by side, and once you do that, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. When you say you've got a stylist, but you keep ending up in looks that feel like they were thrown together in the dark, and the only consistent reference point in your wardrobe seems to mirror the woman connected to the man you're dating, you can label it however you want, but the streets are going to call it exactly what it looks like. And the streets, as always, don't show mercy. Here's the twist in all of this, because Claressa Shields actually did have a stylist, a solid one. A stylist named Tiffany, who put together looks that even the harshest critics had to admit were clean, sharp, and well executed. Photos from that period are still floating around everywhere, and they look like a completely different version of her. Clean lines, tailored fits, pure confidence, the kind of styling that felt like a grown woman on the verge of a Hall of Fame-level legacy. So naturally, the questions started taking over comment sections everywhere. Where did Tiffany go? Why isn't she still working with Claressa Shields? What changed between that polished era and the moment things got serious with the new man? And Tiffany eventually broke her silence, not because she wanted drama, but because she was tired of the constant messages, the repeated questions, and being pulled into a narrative she never asked to be part of. She made it clear she was never a permanent stylist. She only handled a few select looks. She explained that Claressa Shields has had different stylists depending on the major events, and then she dropped the line everyone locked onto the hardest, that she doesn't work for free. Meaning, if there's no official arrangement, she's not showing up. Read that carefully and you understand the subtext instantly, because what it points to is exactly what the internet was already whispering, that the version of Claressa Shields people used to see, so polished and camera-ready, depended heavily on whoever was actively building that image at the time. And what's left now is whatever version budget, speed, and impulse allow in the moment. Then, on top of everything, she went orange, bright, loud, impossible to ignore orange, the kind of orange that pulls focus even when the situation doesn't need any more attention. And here's the part nobody around her seems willing to confront. That wig, whatever it was, didn't even survive a full day. I called it in real time. I said it right there in the comments that this hair was not going to last 24 hours. And right on cue, the next wave of clips dropped and the wig already looked off. The texture was gone, the finish was breaking down, and it looked like it had been through a storm. Day 1, it looked styled, smooth, and camera-ready. Day 2, it looked like it had been left out in rough conditions overnight. Now, you can blame the wig itself, you can blame the brand behind it, you can even blame production if Papoose and the Baddies setup had anything to do with the budget for it. But here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to say out loud. You can buy the most expensive hair in the world and still ruin it overnight if you don't know how to maintain it properly. And with the kind of money she's made, the access she has, and the fact that YouTube alone can teach this in under an hour, there really isn't a valid excuse. None. At that point, it's not about resources, it's about decisions. So what we saw was Day 1 Claressa Shields looking like a polished magazine cover, and Day 2 looking like that same cover got caught in the rain. And then we get to the Papoose moment, because this is where the entire energy shifts in a different direction when you zoom out. The day after those Baddies clips went viral, Claressa Shields showed up at an event for her own promotion, T-Rex Promotions, giving instructions and speaking directly to her fighter Jaquan McCrory, who was signed under her. Under normal circumstances, that's supposed to be a strong image, a champion turned promoter building something bigger than herself, shaping the next generation of boxing. Instead, the clip came across like she hadn't fully recovered. The delivery felt off, the energy felt drained. Even the way she nodded at the end of her own words looked less like confidence and more like self-checking, like she was trying to convince herself she still had control of the moment. And when you place that alongside everything else happening publicly, it hits differently, especially when Papoose enters the frame again as the long-discussed partner figure who's always been portrayed as being in her corner. He shows up at her event, at her ring, at her broadcast, and the atmosphere shifts instantly into something more awkward than celebratory. There's no big reaction, there's no rush of energy. It's just a side hug, a small smile, and a moment that anyone familiar with a cooling dynamic can recognize immediately. And before anyone jumps in and says it's unfair to break down body language that closely, fine, let's just say the hug was normal. Let's say the smile was genuine. The real issue is what came in with him. Because the track playing as Papoose walked into the ring, according to people inside the building and online clips, was a Remy Ma record. A Remy Ma record. Whoever controlled that audio knew exactly what narrative they were feeding, and the trolling was so loud you could practically hear it through the screen. You cannot write irony this perfect in a scripted scene. And the internet did what it always does. It ran it back, slowed it down, and replayed it until the entire building was forced to relive the moment. And while all of that is happening, Papoose is standing in the back of the ring, chewing gum, posted like a final boss in a game nobody is actively playing, just looking like a man who knows cameras are rolling but isn't sure what character he's supposed to be today. And notice the pattern forming. Pay close attention to it. Papoose shows up for boxing events. He shows up for broadcasts. He shows up for anything with a mic, credentials, and a live audience. But the baddies' appearances, the wrestling cameos, the louder, messier reality-style Claressa Shields moments, Papoose is nowhere to be seen. He doesn't show up for those. He doesn't endorse those. He doesn't even acknowledge those. And if that doesn't tell you how his camp privately feels about the direction of this brand, nothing will. Here's where the loop tightens even more, because during that same event, Claressa Shields teased a Wednesday announcement, calling it big in her own words. She gave the date, she said fans would show up, she said Jaquan McCrory would be featured on the undercard. She said she was excited for every fighter under the T-Rex Promotions and Win Records umbrella. And she delivered it all in one breath, like she was racing against her own announcement. Wednesday, that's the loop. That's the cliffhanger. That's the moment that either resets everything or pushes it further down. Because if Wednesday comes and nothing happens, the jokes write themselves all over again. And the people waiting to declare her career finished will finally have all the ammunition they need. Now, while all of this is happening around Claressa Shields, Papoose is on his own corner of the internet doing what he always does, talking Knicks, talking finals, and New York basketball with the energy of a man who's been waiting 20 years for this kind of validation. And in one of those hyped live streams where he's loud and fully in it, he says something that, when you slow it down, explains more about his rap career than anything else ever could. Because he drifts into a tangent. He starts talking about the late DJ Kay Slay, may he rest in peace, and he recalls a moment where he was venting to Kay Slay about people blocking him, doubting him, standing in his way, and how Kay Slay kept telling him straight up that he was giving those people too much power, that what's meant for you cannot be stopped, that nobody can block destiny. And Papoose admits on his own live stream that he is only now starting to understand what Kay Slay meant. Only now, years later, deep into a career he himself often describes as being defined by perceived opposition. That is not a flex, that is a confession. Because when you realize the full arc of Papoose, the reason his major label moment never turned into a full breakout, and why his mixtape era stayed just that, it all points back to a man spending too much time tracking imaginary enemies instead of building forward momentum. And suddenly, the story makes more sense. Nicki Minaj had to be pulled into the streaming era kicking and screaming, but she adapted and evolved. Papoose, by his own admission, stayed mentally parked in the era that built him, while the world moved on without him. He can blame labels, radio, or algorithms all he wants, but even he has admitted the ceiling was internal. People online aren't even giving him the 90s anymore. They're pushing him further back in time. And the harshest comments, the ones that sting the most, point out that he leaned on the women around him for financial stability while convincing himself the industry was plotting against him. That is not a career story. That is a warning sign. So now the full picture is on the table, and it doesn't look good. You have Claressa Shields trading championship prestige for a Zeus network credit. You have a wig that couldn't survive basic daylight. You have a stylist situation that dissolved through clarification. You have a baddie's appearance her partner won't publicly co-sign. You have a Remy Ma track playing as her man walks into her ring. You have a fighter announcing a comeback while looking completely drained in the same breath. You have Papoose standing in the background, chewing gum, treating public events like commentary work on his own relationship, while people online whisper that even the budget energy behind it all has started to thin out. And before anyone jumps in and says it's unfair to break down body language that closely, fine. Let's say the hug was completely normal. Let's say the smile was real and not overthought. The real issue isn't even the greeting, because the track playing as Papoose walked into the ring, according to people inside the building and circulating clips online, was a Remy Ma record. A Remy Ma record. Whoever was running that sound clearly knew exactly what narrative they were pushing, and the trolling was so loud you could practically feel it through the screen. You can't even script irony this queen in a movie scene. And the internet did what it always does. It ran it back instantly, slowed it down, and replayed it until everyone in that arena was forced to sit with the moment. And while all of that is unfolding, Papoose is standing at the back of the ring, chewing gum, posted like a final boss in a game nobody is actively playing, just looking like a man who knows cameras are on him but isn't fully sure what role he's supposed to be playing. And notice the pattern starting to show itself. Pay very close attention to this. Papoose shows up for boxing events, he shows up for broadcasts, he shows up for anything with microphones, credentials, and a live crowd. But the baddies' appearances, the wrestling cameos, and the louder, messier reality TV versions of the Claressa Shields story, Papoose is nowhere in sight. He doesn't show up for those, he doesn't endorse those, he doesn't even acknowledge those publicly. And if that doesn't tell you how his camp feels privately about the direction of this brand, nothing else will. Here's where the loop tightens even more, because during that same event, Claressa Shields teased a Wednesday announcement, calling it big in her own words. She gave the date out loud. She said fans were going to show up. She said Jaquan McElroy would be featured on the undercard. She said she was excited for every fighter under the T-Rex Promotions and Win Records umbrella. And she said it all in one breath, like she was racing against her own moment. Wednesday, that's the loop. That's the cliffhanger. That's the moment that either resets everything or pushes it further into chaos. Because if Wednesday comes and nothing happens, the jokes will write themselves all over again. And the people waiting to call it are going to have everything they need. Now, while all of this is happening around Claressa Shields, Papoose is in his own corner of the internet doing what he does, talking Knicks, talking finals, and reacting to New York basketball with the energy of a man who has waited 2 decades for this kind of validation. And in one of those hyped live stream moments where he's fully locked in, he says something that, when you slow it down, explains more about his rap career than anything else ever has, because he drifts into a long tangent. He starts talking about the late DJ K-Slay, may he rest in peace, and he recalls a conversation where he was venting to K-Slay about people blocking him, doubting him, and standing in his way, and how K-Slay kept telling him straight that he was giving those people too much power. That's what's meant for you can't be stopped, that nobody can block destiny. And Papoose admits on his own live stream that he is only now starting to understand what K-Slay was trying to tell him. Only now, years later, deep into a career he himself describes as shaped by perceived opposition. That is not a flex. That is a cautionary story.